In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast.
Here we go again. Are you guys ready for this?
Today's a doozy.
Today is a doozy. Every day's a doozy
Every
in our
day is
world.
well, it's true.
Probably in everyone's world, really.
Yeah, I guess it's all sort of relative.
Yes.
But this one's a doozy.
This one's a real doozy. Yes, it is. But before we talk about what a doozy of a day it is, let's think about whether or not you've left us a review on iTunes yet.
Right. Specifically a podcast review.
Ooh, yeah.
Because, you do have several lives and things on iTunes.
It's true.
Like you could accidentally go and find Nesta and review an album. And that wouldn't be what we were talking about. I mean, that would be cool as well. But specifically, Be the Wellness Podcast.
Yes.
And in order to do that, you can actually, from iTunes, you can just go into the episode details, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a spot to do it right there.
Yes.
Which is great.
And I know it's like one of those things where you hear us say it and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. But, it really makes a difference. And we've been really badass about asking our folks to do it because honestly, we love just creating podcasts for you and having interesting guests and doing all the things.
Yeah.
We don't really even want to deal with like podcast reviews and how many listens we have and blah, blah, blah. But it turns out in order to get cooler, well, not cooler, but, a bigger like smattering of people and interesting people, they're like, well, how many reviews do you have? You're like, damn it. Back to those review things again. Okay, we'll start asking people for reviews.
Yeah.
So it makes a difference for the content we can bring you, which is really what it's all about. It goes back to like how we can give you an even greater smattering of interesting content.
Way to bring it around.
So it's for you. It's in your own best interest.
Oh, jeez.
So
it's true, though.
Yeah, it is true. It's actually authentically true. That's why, we're trying to make a better effort about requesting
you.
that. Yes, that you guys do that so that we can keep on keeping on. So anyway, moving on, we have an awesome guest today.
We do.
Who, it's funny. We'll talk about this in the podcast, but Leslie, who helps us book our podcast, reached out and said, hey, you should, I want to connect you with this guy, Connor. He has a great new podcast called the Pleasure Monkey Podcast. And, I told him you guys are in Venice. He's out of Austin, Texas. So I was hoping he could do it remotely. And he emailed me back and said, actually, I'm in Venice today. And can they do it today?
Right.
And gave us his address. And he was literally 900 feet from us. So it was one of those things where sometimes life just lines up. You are meant to meet certain people. And Adam happened to be at work that day. So I went down and recorded on his podcast and we instantly hit it off. And I was like, you should really come on our podcast. It'd be great to introduce our audience to you and your podcast. And obviously you want to meet Adam because who wants to miss out on Adam?
Right. Nobody.
I mean, if you come to Venice, it's like you go to Abbot Kinney,
Muscle Beach.
And
then you're like, okay, where's Adam?
The only thing that will complete this trip is Bubby.
Thanks anyway. That's awful nice of you.
So anyhow, yeah. So we invited him to come on the podcast and it was really fun because we love doing podcasts in person.
Right.
And so he was able to just walk that 900 feet.
Yeah, and come in.
And come be with us in
out.
person. Yeah. So, all the way from Austin, Texas. He has a really cool podcast, again, called the Pleasure Monkey Podcast. And what I like about it is that they're just really authentic conversations going on about what's going on in the world today.
Right. Well, yeah, and just what's up with being a human.
Yeah.
Like, what is this higher primate thing that we're running around in and what's it all about? Which is cool because, it does, like, for as much talk as there is about health and wellness and psychology and all of these different things going on, very few people are just like being kind of raw about what it's like to be a human
Yes.
and all of the good and the bad and the ugly and all of just the weirdness that comes along with trying to drive these meat vehicles around this like whirling spacecraft that we're on.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's giving a voice to, some of the things that are probably going on in most of our minds, but some of us are too scared, too nervous, too afraid to actually broach the topic and like really pull it to the surface and see what's there.
Right.
And, I think that is something that we need to, all of us need to be seeking more ways to be more comfortable with ourselves and this
Right.
human experience. And that is what his podcast is lending an ear to, is like, let's just talk about the real things that are here for us. Let's
Right.
talk about, the whole spectrum of what it means to be human. And let's, have these authentic conversations that can drive us further in the way that we are comfortable with who we are in this experience.
There you go.
Yeah. Which is so cool. So,
Yeah.
and I just really, honestly, we just hit it off with Connor. He felt like instant family and just like long lost friends. And I think you'll get that in the podcast. So we really, again, hope you'll check out his podcast. You can check out, me recording with him on there, and he's got lots of great episodes with other interesting guests as well. So check him out.
That's what's up.
That is what's up.
And without further ado, here's Connor. All right, we're live.
We're here.
Welcome to our humble abode.
I love this place, man. This is a great spot.
So Connor and I met the other day, and I went over to his place, which was literally 900 feet down the street randomly. And he's like, I want to live here. This is amazing. And then you came here and you're like, no, I want to live here.
This place is amazing. Like, you don't find like badass studios like this in Austin.
Yeah.
I've been trying to make one happen.
Yeah.
I think it's just because I'm not supposed to live there anymore. I think the universe is like, get out of here.
Pushing you out.
It's time to
Been here for
move.
long enough.
Yeah, too much ice. Because you guys
Yeah.
get the ice storms, right? In the
It was
wintertime.
sleeting there yesterday. And then I'm like, oh, I got to fly back there.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the place, but man,
Oh, yeah.
Venice just calls to me.
It's pretty tempting, man.
I
It's
know.
like the Pied Piper.
It is, right? Yeah. My buddy's like, the streets are paved in gold. Just get out here. You can work at Soho House. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Golden piss.
Yeah, right. It's like, it smells like weed in Palo Santo everywhere.
Yeah, dude, well, yeah. I don't know if you've done it yet, but you got to make the trek either on, like, the slower you go, the more profound the difference is. So either bicycle or foot. But if you take the oceanfront trail from Santa Monica to Venice, like Santa Monica is so pretty and pristine and everything's nice and it kind of smells like coconut suntan lotion on the beach. And you hit Venice and it's like weed and 3-day-old piss, like immediately. You're like, oh,
Right
all
at the corner.
It gives it character,
Clearly.
you know? I
Yeah,
don't get
yeah.
enough of that. You know,
Yeah.
Austin
it
smells
does.
just nice.
Yeah.
It smells like an apartment store everywhere. Everyone's friendly and like no one honks their horns. Like, you need a little bit of that edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some anger.
Yeah.
Some anger
Like,
honks.
I walked by a heroin needle the other day and I was like, cool.
Yeah. You're like, it's
Yeah.
legit.
Yeah, this
That's
place
what's
is,
up.
there's still some roughness here.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I guess Austin's probably going through some of this too, right? With like, there has to be like some gentrification type stuff going on there with the tech boom and all the, or just business in general boom.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
Austin's grown a lot, and East Austin used to be kind of rough, and now it's just it's funny because you see that in a lot of towns. Like, it's changed so much. You'll see like $1 million house next to like
Yeah.
a house that barely is standing up.
Right.
It's strange.
Yeah,
so I've been there for
yeah.
8 years, and it's changed a lot in the
Yeah.
time. But I've been going there since I was a kid when it was a small town, and like Willie Nelson could still go out and eat places.
Oh, yeah.
It's like not a thing anymore.
Yeah. You don't run into him at the, is it Whataburger? You guys got a,
Well, we got Whataburger.
or Sonic though. Sonic
Drive-In,
yeah.
Texas stop sign, they say.
Yeah.
It's hard though in Venice in particular, because like I used to just, walk around and just automatically like be able to ask like, I wonder what drugs that person's on. And you
Right.
can't do that anymore, and it's sad.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're all sober. Like, what's happening in my town?
Yeah. No,
I hate this.
Yeah, we had a moment the other night at Venice Ale House, which was like one of our haunts since we first came here. Like, oh my God, what could be better? You got a restaurant that's right on the beach. It's like grass-fed burgers and coconut oil, sweet potatoes. You're just like, what is going on here? And it was the coolest people. And the other night we were down there, and it was all bad. It was like a bad episode of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It was a
Really?
trip.
It was a trip, yeah.
Like the whole situation was different. It was like, I hope this isn't the deal. It was
Yeah.
almost like maybe there was a party nearby
Yeah.
that was, I don't know
I
if it was
think
a
there
Google
was.
party.
Yeah,
Had
there
to
was
have
like a
been.
couple
Yeah.
birthday parties or something, but we were like, this is so weird because you're just used to seeing people with like weird color hair and face tats and like again, I wonder what drugs they're on. Like
Yeah,
they look
what-
like they're
what
having
got
a
'em to
great
this
time,
state?
or like
Yeah.
oh that one went all bad. Like you're just
Yeah.
used to those questions, and all I was thinking was like, wow, I guess like this is like where people. I guess everyone shops at Banana Republic now.
Yeah, right.
Like, no, I mean
Yeah.
I don't want to be a
Bunch of
hater,
haters.
but it's just really weird. It's
It is
strange.
different. It's
Yeah.
almost like now that we're talking about it, there's so much of that. Like Austin doesn't have as much of a weird vibe anymore. You have to
Right.
go. You have to go seek
You
it
have to
out.
go deep.
Yeah.
When you guys come to town for Paleo FX, like I'll take you to some weird places.
All right.
It's,
We-
it's just a little bit
we'll
different
hold
and
you to
fun. You'll
that.
find it, but it's like, and then the line to get in there is like out the door, just because
Right.
everybody's like, "Give me the weird. I
Please.
want the weird."
It's true.
I
Yeah.
think everybody needs that though. It's like you're buttoned up all the time. Like
Yeah.
then you just go. It's funny if you take that same persona to a bar.
Yeah.
Whereas like that's where you're supposed to
Yeah.
loosen up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah,
And then you
totally.
end up shit face down on the curb somewhere.
That's actually interesting. I wonder what the deal is with that because that's definitely, so when we first moved to LA, we lived in Santa Monica for a year. And then we came to Venice and we were kind of shopping for a beachier spot then because we were, I don't know, inland a little ways. in
We were
Santa
a
Monica.
mile from the
We were a
beach. It was
mile
way
from
too
the
far.
beach. Yeah. But,
It was
it's
like-
come on.
8-minute jog.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
I mean, getting there is one thing, but after you hang out, then you got to come back.
Yeah.
And we wound up in Venice. Like I don't know, we were gonna go to Manhattan Beach or something, and then we wound up here in Venice, actually in this spot. And it was like the fact that it was seedier and weirder that like dropped us in here. We're like, it's like we could go. Manhattan Beach is like any beach town.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
nowhere I've ever been that's like Venice.
No.
Like
Yeah.
let's go and check that out. And so that attracted us. You know what I mean? So of course that general thing starts to attract more and more people. And I think eventually you like dilute it. We
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
We like it because it's just a little weirder than we are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so then like the next layer comes in and the next layer comes in and pretty soon it's just not that weird anymore,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
don't know.
crazy. Like now when a helicopter goes overhead at night, like with the spotlight in the backyard, I get scared. I used to be immune to that. I'd be
Yeah,
like,
that's
I guess I should shut the door in case there's like a crazy murderer on the
Yeah.
loose.
Well, I think that's something that we want in life. Kind of is always a little escape to getting outside of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really close.
Just the limit. Yeah.
Just a little bit. Like I can just step outside, to my toe in something uncomfortable, as long as it's accessible. Because if you live in like a Nerf world,
Right,
you don't
yeah.
really have any. There's no consequences for your actions, and you just
Right.
end up padded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Soft like a weirdo.
Just
Yeah,
bumping
yeah.
around like a
Yeah.
bubble.
Then if it's and like you said, if it's too far though, then you're just like, shit, dude, this is sketchy. Like this whole situation's no fun. I mean, you do want to be able to, because like with my job, I'm gone a lot, so
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to know that like Vanessa can take the dogs out for a walk, and it's not going to be like
Yeah.
super sketchy. I mean, there's
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, although I feel like the locals like learned their lesson with her pretty early on. Like she's pretty easygoing, but there's a few things you don't do. Like you
Yeah.
don't whistle from a creepy van. Like you don't
Oh,
you
you
don't
don't
do
like
the
that?
creepy
Oh
van
my
whistle.
God.
I love a good creepy wet van.
I'll lose my mind.
I just like witnessed it before where the guy's like I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Like I mean
I don't know. It's like an immediate switch, like switches flipped in me, and I just lose my mind because I think it's just like it scares me, like, and then once I get scared, I just go full animal. Like I just literally lose my mind and like go full attack, like there.
Totally feel. I'm like that with honking. Like that's why New York is so hard for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just. I don't think it's just
violating.
par for the course. But to me, it feels like it's like someone being a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an audible version of being an asshole.
Right.
I'm an
So it's just
asshole.
like if somebody honks at me, I'm just like. It irks me so bad. My blood boils, and I'm a
Right.
pretty chill guy, generally
For
speaking.
sure,
but it's one of
yeah.
those things I totally get that where it's like
Yeah.
this gets real primal real quick.
It
Dude,
does,
it is
yeah.
tough. The honking is tough. Like especially, I don't know. I think I'm with you on that one because like I feel like I pay a lot of attention when I'm driving. Like I'm generally speaking probably doing it about as efficiently as it can be done. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If there was an opportunity for me to go on like a left turn against the light or whatever without dying, I would have taken it, And this guy behind you is like, come on. Like you could have totally done it. Like you want to get out and be like, no, motherfucker, I could not have made that. You know what I mean? Let's have a discussion about this. Yeah.
I actually had that for the only time I've ever gotten out of my car was at a stop sign. This cab driver behind me in Austin, and I was trying to turn left. There just wasn't an opportunity.
Yeah.
It was like slammed up, and he was going right, so it was just completely inconveniencing
yeah.
him.
Oh, right,
And I was
right.
like, listen, man, I don't know what to tell you. And he just kept honking. I was like, if he does this shit one more time. I was driving like this old Land Cruiser I used to drive when I had my gym. I was like in this little alleyway by the gym. And I just I parked it, turned it off, and got out and was like, listen, dude, like, this isn't okay. And it was even the whole time I was having a conversation with him about how what he was doing wasn't okay. There still was not an opportunity for me to have gone. Right? Like, we still left at the same time that we would have left anyway.
That's funny.
It was like, I'm not trying to like fight you right now, but someone needs to tell you to stop.
Yeah. This is not an acceptable. Well, because it's like a cultural thing with the taxi drivers for sure. I mean, they honk at each other. Like that's just part of the deal. Yeah,
well, and it's a cultural thing in New York in general. Just the honk like is acceptable. It's just an acceptable expression. Like I feel frustrated.
The world needs to hear me. Everybody just wants to be seen. That's like all everybody wants, just to be seen and understood.
Totally. So we were saying how this podcast was going to go dark before we started it, and we're doing a good job.
We're keeping it light. Kept it very light.
It's the crystal.
It is the crystal.
I knew I felt something. I knew my chakras were aligned.
It's the stabilizing energy. So Connor, this is so exciting because we met like 5 days ago or something.
5 days ago, yeah.
And we were just instant pals.
Soul fam.
Yeah, totally, for sure. So you had me on your podcast called Pleasure Monkey.
The Pleasure Monkey podcast.
Yeah, and
I
of
love
course,
the way it sounds when I say it.
It sounds so good. It just rolls off the tongue.
Clear your throat. It's the Pleasure Monkey podcast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was telling you have a good podcast voice too. Adam has a really good podcast voice as well. Yeah,
I noticed it.
Yeah, you guys could have a real sexy thing going together.
We should just talk really low to each other and say super random things. Could just be like a meme reading podcast. Just go on Instagram and read whatever comes up.
Like if you just never text me, just only send me voice memos. Like, all right, hello.
I'm coming to town.
Wish we could dinner at Paleo FX.
Tell us about it.
We had a lot of fun with the podcast. I mean, the podcast came to be, I talked about it for 3 years and then it made it happen. So I started working for Aubrey Marcus, the CEO of On It, and I was doing project management for him and started doing this course called Go For Your Win. And we just actually relaunched it just now. So I'm working on that again. And I just started doing Facebook Lives into the community, which is about 800 people or so. And that was my first time after leaving CrossFit. So I coached CrossFit for 7 years prior to that, of coaching people on personal development without fitness being the excuse. Because as we all know, if you're in strength and conditioning or fitness, fitness is the symptom, right? You're tracking something down.
Totally.
It's like, with most 25-year-old guys, like they really just want to get laid. Like that's the reason they're working out. It's not because they're actually worried about their health.
Right.
Whereas like, and then you get, and you get someone in here who's 45, like they just want to chase their grandkids around.
Totally.
Like play at a high level,
Right.
So when it came down to really helping people with what they identified as their issues or limitations in life, that really got me excited. Because when I left CrossFit, I knew it was about people, not fitness. Like I'm 6'4" and I'm a big dude. And I was good at this stuff. So people came to me for that language that I spoke, the language of exercise and strength and conditioning. But when I had an opportunity to get outside of that and just work with people, it was really, really great. So that turned into developing a voice around that, which turned into starting a podcast, kind of in partnership with On It. And we had gone to Peru the year before that, and Aubrey had seen this vision of walking through the jungle, and there was a giant statue of just a happy monkey. At the base of the statue, it said, "We are the pleasure monkeys." So we turned like all, that group of people was like the pleasure monkeys in Peru. There was 18 of us.
Nice.
So when it came time to name the podcast, it's like, I don't really want it to be the Connor Show. That's weird. And I was even like playing with the idea of having a panel, and I have like these group podcasts, which I really love because it's being a group dialogue. They're so fun.
Yeah. Right.
So I was like, fuck it, we'll call it the Pleasure Monkey Podcast.
Nice. Yeah.
And the graphic designer for On It made the logo, and it's like this smiling monkey with some shades on, like ready to go to the beach. I threw some palm trees on there and started an online community, which I've built out before, and so we have a lot of engagement there, and even turned that into personal development coaching with people, which has been really fun. So it's kind of it's one of those things. Like when I owned the gym, the CrossFit gym, like it was so hard. I struggled so hard to like try to make it work.
Right.
And I feel like this thing just succeeds in spite of me. I don't know. It just like a snowball going down the hill. So it's been really, really fun.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I think that's kind of the dream, right? Anytime you start trying to express whatever it is you've got going on, whether it's a strength and conditioning thing or however you're connecting with people, that's what you're shooting for, is for it to seem easy and still work, right? Because like, man, if you're just pushing mud uphill all the time with this kind of stuff, you're like, Jesus, is this really what this is supposed to be about? Like, is my message, does anybody even want to hear what I'm saying? Because it seems like this is way harder than it needs to be, So it sounds to me like you found your glide path, That's cool.
It's funny, good to feel what alignment feels like and then be able to share it. Like, one thing I've realized about myself is that I only stay grounded for very brief periods. But for whatever reason, I can get myself into a clusterfuck and then sort it out and articulate it well.
Yeah,
so I just continually do that.
Which, I mean, that's like, that's not a terrible way of approaching
right?
it.
Like, whether that be like psychedelics or relationships that are challenging. Like, I do thrive for that and like leaning into discomfort in a way.
Yeah.
And it is fun, like once you can find alignment. But a lot of that comes down to, generally speaking, like choosing your sacrifices.
Right.
I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson's work now. And
Yeah.
actually just finished his book, 12 Rules for Life.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful statement. One of the most beautiful things about life is that you can't have everything.
Yeah.
Right? You got to choose your sacrifices. So it's like, if I was to say I didn't sacrifice finances and stability to do something that was kind of crazy that I thought I thought might work, know. That checks some different boxes, of course, but I would make that trade any day. But I'd rather not have all of it.
Right.
Because then it's a little bit sweeter when you have to leave something behind.
Well, you have to
100%.
have something to strive for. And if there's something left behind in the back of your mind, you're like, maybe I can still tackle it someday. Or maybe there's a way that I can go after that last little piece. I think this is where you see people who are retired or even like trust fund kids or whatever, where like everything's kind of set. And it's very like destabilizing almost, because I think we are, as humans, like we need something to strive for. It's so innate in us to have something to work towards. So like to leave a couple boxes unchecked is like healthier for the boxes that are checked. You're like, okay, those ones are unchecked, but these ones have strong, bold black
These
checks.
are filled all the way in, like, with the number 2 pencil.
Yes.
Make your mark dark.
Break the lead off.
Yeah,
filling it in.
exactly.
Well, I think and actually, Jordan Peterson might have been the one who said this, or at least most recently in my recollection, is that like struggle is what gives people purpose.
Yeah.
Having something in your life that's difficult, but not so difficult that it's like unmanageable, seems to be like this thing that kind of brings it all together, right? It's like the ultimate hormetic stressor of your entire existence. You push a little bit, and then it gives you a sense of triumph and purpose when you actually succeed,
Yeah, I mean,
It was pretty profound.
Good, my turn. No, so I mean, to piggyback off of that, like there's something about creating order from chaos, right? And I think the biggest thing there, Jordan Peterson talks about this too. We can just keep
we'll
deep in that.
stay on the
everyone loves it. It's great content. It's like 1 foot firmly planted in stability and 1 foot in chaos. That's balance.
Yeah.
But you have to have objectivity to reach that, right? You have to really look at yourself and be like, well, where am I at actually? What am I actually capable of right now? What's stable? What's not stable? Where can I create stability and then forge more chaos? And then you create more chaos and make order of the chaos. And then, then you have order, and then you make more chaos. And it's just that that cycle. And then hopefully you get somewhere before you die.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
The quest is still there. That's the hero's journey, right? And you can learn so much about yourself, because to take shape as a human being with character, you have to have friction.
Right.
Like there is no like, again, to bring that Nerf analogy back around, like there's nobody gets hurt playing with a Nerf ball,
right?
Unless you like run into the wall or something like that. But it's like you gotta have a little bit of risk just to get you into the place.
So how was it for you? Because you grew up in Texas, right? So we were talking a little bit about this the other day. I kind of want to like peek into this coming of age story for you, because you are raised in Texas, right? And you said that you didn't try any psychedelics till you were like 25?
I didn't smoke weed till I was 20.
Oh, 20. Okay, right.
Yeah, so I started smoking weed when I was 20. I mean, so just to give context, like I was terrified of drugs when I was growing up. I grew up in Graham, Texas, which is like a 8,000, 9,000 person town in between like Fort Worth, Dallas area and Oklahoma. So it's really like oil and gas and cattle, right?
Right. Just the basics. Maybe some cigarettes.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely some cigarettes. A lot of tobacco.
I could smell it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I smelled like cigarettes all growing up. But it's like I grew up with like addict parents.
Okay.
So I grew up with my grandparents. It was really weird. My whole life has kind of been this journey, this kind of coming of age, if you will, like came about just because it kind of made my story make sense. Like it's if you really look at it, I'm objective about it, it's kind of a nice it's all kind of comes to a head here. And I had like very loving grandparents. And then I had parents that were addicts. So I got to feel like what it's like to be completely abandoned and disappointed and frustrated and confused. And then also extremely loved at the same time, which is really confusing for a kid. Like, this is cool. But then also I'm like kind of bummed that my mom is like comes and goes and I may not see her for 6 months. And then, you know, my dad gets locked up, and it's a lot for a kid to process.
For sure,
complex.
yeah.
You put a lot of it on yourself. And then, you know, I was an overweight kid too. So there was that piece of you know, being picked last for things or being made fun of or not being able to talk to girls, which is kind of funny now to look back at that. But I got to be pretty good at sports when I was bigger. So I hit like 6 foot in the 7th grade. I was like 200 pounds and 6 foot in like the 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
So I was a big kid. Right?
Yeah.
So and then I started working oil and gas construction when I was like 12, 13 with my granddad.
Okay.
So it was like a blue collar. Like, it was just a weird upbringing, right? Considering where I am now, like the fact that I'm sitting in Venice on a podcast, like, it doesn't make a ton of my friends are like, "What the fuck do you do?" I'm like, it's weird. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
I talk
About like life and sex and drugs. It's just crazy. But yeah, no, it was really interesting. And then the biggest move for me, you know, I spent a couple years early in college staying close to home, and I played football, and then I was injured. So it really just like my entire identity was gone. I played football from 4th grade up until my sophomore year of college. And I was working in oil and gas and blew my S1 disc. I couldn't get in the 3-point stance for a year. They told me I'd never deadlift again. And I was like, I don't really accept that. So I started reading like old school stuff. Mark Rippetoe's Starting Strength. I read that. And started to understand how to move my body a little bit more. And then I went to visit my buddy down at Texas State. And this doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? I just transferred to a different school. But I went down there and I realized if I go here, I know one person. None of my friends went there. I really didn't know anybody. So it's like I am exactly what they perceive me to be, and without anything else. Like I am whatever I tell them I am and show them that I am. Right. And I'm completely free of this like life that I've lived entirely up until this point. Right. So that was my first big, between being injured and completely losing my identity, which was football player, right? Which I think a lot of people still hold on to for their whole lives.
Oh,
they
for
never
sure.
let go of like
football over the moon.
It's a big one.
Put me in, we would take in state, you know. And then going and then having the first opportunity to reshape my identity and accept that, you know. And now even looking back with the kind of understanding I have of how flexible our identities are, like that was really profound for me. And you know, I look at that and people are like, what do you think your biggest accomplishment is in life? And I'm like, getting out of my hometown, and that surrounding area, because it was deal. You essentially like sacrifice, again, like choosing your sacrifices, like you sacrifice who you used to be, and it was a really great experience. So from that went into coaching CrossFit, and like then the rest is history. But it was cool to go and just completely reestablish myself. I don't even know if I answered the question.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect though, because this is really like your first transformation that you probably had. It was like the moment, and I think to me that's what transformation is about. It's about like anytime you go into the cocoon and you reemerge something new, and like this is probably the first time you realize that you can emerge anew, like of your own choosing. And I think that's a pivotal time for anybody in their life, but probably particularly at that age for you, because, you know, I think those early years, 18 to like 22, you obviously grow a lot past that, but I think they're pivotal years that start you on a trajectory in your life. And like if you in those years discovered, wow, I can reinvent myself, that becomes a theme that you get to rediscover throughout the rest of your journey, which it seems like you do. Yeah, like you are, if anything, I've gathered from you, like you have embraced this idea about reinventing who you are in order to find the next version of yourself, which is really inspiring, right?
I love that. No, so one of my mentors, Mark England from Vocabulary, he's a fantastic guy. I always check out his work. But he says you're a verb, not a noun. Right? And what's funny is I talk a lot about gratitude and compassion, but to have that for your past, you have to step away from it a little. You have to create a little bit of space and then look at it and understand like what are the gifts that that experience gave you, right? Like, and what are the patterns that it gave you, and what are the limiting beliefs it gave you? Like, it's going to give you all this shit. You got to kind of sift through it and see where are the nuggets and the pearls, right? And then you can take that with you and leave the baggage behind. But again, every time you do that, you're having to deal with a little bit of loss of your identity, and with that loss, you create space to re-emerge, and it becomes really powerful. And I've done that now even moving to Austin from school was that, and kind of, then my identity I filled my identity with the CrossFit coach guy or the strong guy or this guy or the, borderline obnoxious, really loud dude. But then, and then now it's a reshaping of that. And that, I think that's one thing I got better at, was like completely letting something go.
Yeah.
Like when I closed the gym and I realized that wasn't in alignment with who I was anymore, I had the option to go back and coach some CrossFit and just stay in that world. But I was like, no, I have to just stop.
Time for something fresh.
I create that space, and it's fucking terrifying.
It's
Yeah.
You just
so
don't
terrifying.
know, but you're fully stepping into chaos. And you're like, man,
Yeah.
I gotta find some solid ground somewhere. But
Yeah.
if you have some open-mindedness about that, you can really see things you never knew were there, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And if you kind of thrust yourself into the darkness, you can really figure it out.
Yeah.
But you got to have a lot of faith in yourself to be able to do that. So if you start young,
Yeah.
Establish that as a pattern. I think it's super smart, because it really is tough. I mean, it's super easy to get institutionalized by whatever your surroundings are. You know what I mean? And I grew up in a tiny little town in Northern California. It's a similar situation. Like the biggest success of my life, besides probably dealing with Vanessa for the last 15 years, is getting out of that fucking town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like and again, it's you probably feel the same way. There's nothing against the guys that stayed there and have continued to make lives there and do their thing. But for me, it wasn't. I mean, it was a dramatically limiting environment to be in, and so just to break out of that and then, spend a lot of time trying to shuck all of the kind of bullshit that comes along with it, the things like, oh, well, you shouldn't even want these things because, well, nobody like this was, nobody in that town had money. Nobody was successful from that perspective, no, and so because of that, nobody even had dreams or aspirations of doing like cool shit. You know what I mean? Like not that you have to be rich to do cool shit, but at this point, it takes a little bit of resources. Like if you want to go see the world, it takes some resources to make it happen. It's like not even on the menu there, because it's just not something that people do. And so, in retrospect, looking back at all of it to me, or at this point, there was no point that I felt like, oh, living here is super, super limiting and I really want to do something else. It was like just a happy set of circumstances that got me out and kind of exposed to some of these other things that eventually led me to Vanessa, who was like, we gotta go do some shit.
Fuck out of here.
We gotta go do some shit. We gotta go. We gotta make some shit happen. And
Trust me, I know it seems sketchy, but it's gonna be awesome.
This seems super sketchy, but I've seen the other side. We've got to get there. You know what I mean? And I mean, this is like a little bit of a.
Talking back to the future, like, we're going. We don't know.
It's exactly like this. You're not gonna believe this shit. Everything runs on bananas. It's gonna be fine. But it's a little bit of a dramatic oversimplification, but not really. Like this is like more or less what happens. And I think it's an important thing to have had those experiences where you're like, no, man, remember how uncomfortable it was and how nervous you were about like, I don't even know. Like
where we got married.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. Getting married outside of my hometown was a big fucking deal.
Really?
Oh man. It caused all manner of problems in, the hometown crowd,
Yeah.
And it turned out fine. Everything was good, but there's like, so you think about in your life, like looking back at it now, like that's hilarious. Like who even cares and what's the big deal, right? But what decision am I pondering today with just as much angst, that in 10 years I'd look back and be like, dude, you should have just done that. What were you dicking around for, And so I think to get back to what I think you were saying is that establishing a pattern of that early on is super helpful, because you can always decide not to. But if you're so afraid, if you've never accomplished it, if you've never been able to do that, a complete, molting, so to speak, of your skin and establish yourself anew, man, good luck if you're 50 when you want to do it the first time,
Yeah, those patterns are deep at that point.
Yeah.
But so you do a lot of lifestyle coaching, right? So, and I don't know what the age range that you coach is, but I mean, honestly, a lot of people don't try this stuff till they're 40 or 50. They don't actually get the chance to do it in their 20. And a lot of people in these small towns get married or have kids or, whatever. Their life just puts them into this place where they don't have the luxury of really, just stepping out into chaos. So what are like some tools or some things that you give people that can help them get comfortable with the discomfort of all of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's funny you say that, because my clients, it's I get them at one end or the other usually. So it's in their 40s or late 30s, early 40s where they've been disillusioned.
Right.
Or before they get into it when they're like 23.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's like, and it's almost like even numbers there. But it's the inverse for each one. Like that's when I keep my coaching and my development practice is really open ended, because they're completely different. You have the millennial kids, right? Which I'm a millennial too, so I can't say I'm like an old wise millennial though.
Yeah, you are. You're like
I remember dial up and like getting in a chat room when I was a kid. And, like, saying weird
You're like
things.
right on the verge. Yeah.
I was like like a 12-year-old talking to other 12-year-olds and thinking they were lesbians or something weird. Sorry, it's completely derailed it. But no, so with the younger people, it's kind of like everybody's been sold this idea that they can be whatever they want to be. Right. So with them, it comes to being practical. It's like it's the complete opposite almost.
Yeah.
I don't go, hey, maybe mushrooms are a good idea for you.
Right.
Like that's not, and that may happen based on where they're at, but sometimes like I want to live my dreams, and I'm like, okay, cool. Well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Like how do you implement that into your life, and how do you where can you find stability and where can you create chaos?
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And that's ownership. That's creating your reality. That's the law of attraction. All these cool, fun, like woo buzzwords are really come down to creating stability and then creating your own resistance. Because when you can do that and you can figure out what alignment even feels like, it's nice to be practical with them and say, hey, like you're not going to have this shit figured out for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can be fully where you are, right, and we can find some practices. A lot of times journaling is one of the best practices for that. Is really feeling and seeing and making real what's in your head. And then using that as a platform to then really be objective about your reality and then create from there. Yeah. Right. Now, something that may be more relatable is people that are on the other side, right? So they have the money and they have the life, and I call it the power of disillusionment. When you get all the things you thought you were supposed to have and you still don't feel like enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's a lot of fun for me.
I just pictured you with like a sledgehammer in someone's house, knocking out walls. Like, here we go.
Exactly. It's kind of like that.
The proverbial walls,
Yeah. And it's like, that's the people like, okay, well, there's this really cool place in Peru.
Yeah.
And you're going to go down there, and you're going to do ayahuasca for like 12 days.
Right.
No, it's just stuff like that. It's like, we're going to break the pattern at this point, right? So for the younger younger guys and the younger girls, it comes down to breaking patterns of kind of fantasy. Like we're gonna break your fantasy patterns, look at the world for what it is, and bring some reality to that, and love it. Like have compassion for that, have compassion for yourself, and you're about to walk into a world where you're gonna fuck up a lot. So don't let that scare you. Right on the other end, with people that have kind of become established, it's okay. Let's start breaking the patterns of rationality and start to actually see. Because what you're saying, if you put on blinders,
right,
you have no context. You have no when you don't have context, you can't see the opportunities that are right in front of you.
Right.
So a lot of times it's something silly like ecstatic dance, or like you guys do surfing, right? Like surfing's another one of those things, like just getting outside of yourself and just firing some neurons in a different way, like expanding yourself, right? Going to a gym and finding some community, going to a meditation group. It's like one of those things that I love to do with my clients is I find out, where they are in the world, right? So say like one of my clients is in Houston, and he's the perfect example. He's about to buy some property in Colombia, and he does all these different things. He's a really awesome guy. And we found an ecstatic dance for him to go to on a Sunday. And I was like, cool, go to the ecstatic dance, journal about it, let's see where we're at, and just break outside of yourself a little bit. But it's so individual, right? It's like, what is that thing that scares you just enough?
Yeah.
It's weird enough.
Yes.
And you can just let yourself go.
Right. Just shakes the snow globe up just enough.
Just enough, right?
Doesn't break it, but just gets that snow nice and fluffy.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. That's a trip. So how do you, because it is dramatically individual, right? So for somebody that might just be like literally walking up to a stranger and introducing themselves, right? Freaks them the fuck out.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh my God, you're not gonna believe what I did today, Which like, there's definitely a period in my life where that was like a real thing for me, you know, for sure. And so how do you? I don't even know if there's an answer for this, but
no, I know what you're asking. I got an answer.
Yeah, like how do you do it?
So we start up. It's open ended, and I keep this behind. Like I don't put this out there for them outside of verbally, because we may stay on. I don't want to set up like here's 6 steps to mastering your life, and then if you stay like stuck on step 1 for too long, then you failed and you suck and everybody hates you, and all the stories that we tell ourselves, right?
Right.
So step 1 is just creating awareness of your state, right? And this is what again journaling comes into play here a ton, and that's just setting the intention. Like the power of intentions, I don't think gets enough credit. Like just the intention to how you want to show up and understanding that, and when you can write it down and make it real, it's super helpful. But if you could just go through your day-to-day normal, like whatever it is now, don't change a damn thing.
Yeah.
Right. And just create the intention to be aware of what changes your state. Like what triggers you positive, negative, neutral. What do you just not care about? What do you care about a ton? What do you wish you had more of? And just start to create an understanding of that. And we verbalize that in the coaching practice, right? So we'll just talk about what does that feel like for you? And then where are the opportunities within that, right? So we start to, step 2 of that is just track down the feelings. Okay, where does that feeling come from? Let's track it down. Let's try to find the origin place. Let's find the roots of that, where that's coming from, you know. And there's that's where the compassion and kind of self-understanding, self-love comes in, but in a very rational, practical way. Like I try to keep it as minimally woo-woo as possible,
Totally, yeah.
So well, cool. That comes from here. Now you've created a pattern. Right, I don't like to use insecurities as much because I think like if you think about it's patterns,
Triggers
right? Like
people,
they can be positive or negative. I don't want to trigger someone to be like, it's like by saying insecurities, I'm saying like a fork.
Right.
And by saying patterns, I'm saying like silverware.
Yeah.
It's another tool. It's another thing.
Yeah.
So we go and find that, and we start to create compassion around that, and then we say, all right, well, what's in alignment with you? Can you let some things go? Generally it's letting things go, but maybe it's adding some more things, and then we create experiences, and that's where you get to the let's go talk to somebody random at a bar. Let's ask the person. It's taking advantage of the opportunities that are right in front of your face. Can you genuinely show up, make eye contact with the cashier at the grocery store, and ask her how her day is? Yeah, something little like that, and then it's okay, cool. Wow, that felt really good. It felt good to connect with another human being. You know, can you ask your partner, you know, a very vulnerable question, and then can you sit in your feelings whenever you get an honest response and not react and stay still and stay calm and let them keep talking without trying to fix it if you're a man, generally speaking.
Right.
Yeah. Or without getting emotional if you're on the feminine side of that whole situation, right? It's like just understanding objectively where you are and then just create an action plan around that. But the first 2 steps are generally the same, and then it just diverges in all kinds of different directions, right? This could be like, we need to sign up for this retreat and do this thing, and like, I'm going to support you, and then we'll, again, keep track of your state, like when you start to panic about something. Yeah. The intern that I have working with me now, she said she just signed up to go to Costa Rica on a meditation retreat and do ayahuasca, and she's like got all these feelings coming up. So sometimes the value is just like, I'm hoping myself, and this guy might like me, and then I'm going to feel awkward, and she's like has innumerable stories of things that have not happened yet. Like, okay.
She's just covering her bases.
Like, what do you? All right.
Isn't it so interesting how we do love to create stories? Like I think there's kind of a beautiful part of it, which is that we are imaginative beings. You know, we really are. And I think for so many of us, we've shut down our creative outlets, that the only place that our imagination can bubble up is in the stories we tell ourselves day in and day out. Where I actually think if you were to have more creativity in your life, you were able to actually express that and get that out, you might be able to like squelch that internal conversation all the time that you're creating these like other paradigms of reality that never come to fruition because we're just so shut down in our creativity. And that is all I have to say about that. That is going nowhere, but...
It makes a ton of sense. I love that you brought that up because I think imagination is one of those things that we don't give enough credit, right? It's like, well, you're living in a fantasy land, which sometimes you are. Because if you don't use your imagination, it's going to do something. It's going to go crazy where it's like, well, how about I channel my imagination into really imagining what I want my life to look like, right? Like, let me say I'm going to imagine what I want my life to look like in 5 years. And then I can imagine working backwards from that and see what the actual steps to getting to that place would look like. Right. Well, and then now that I kind of have a rational understanding of what the steps look like to getting to that place, then I can notice I have context on what that takes and what opportunities I might need to seek out and what actions I might need to bring forward to the world. Right. And then I do those things, and then you end up in a place that's probably different, but probably similar to where you've imagined yourself to be, right? Right. But you live with blinders on again, and you don't have the power. You don't get to use your imagination as the powerful tool that it is. Yeah. It is instead, tells you why all the girls are looking at you weird. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, you have no like control over it. It just runs wild.
Just runs wild. Yeah. It's interesting. So one of the things I was thinking when you were talking a minute ago is, I wonder like sometimes if we ever really get over or we really ever control the things, like we become more masterful about our thoughts and the things that we know work for us and don't work for us. You were talking about how you ask people what triggers them one way or another. And I think it's interesting to consider, and I kind of grapple with this. Like, I don't know that we ever become so zen that nothing triggers us, but we definitely can create like these processes for getting back on track. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so that triggered you in a way that isn't in alignment with the way that you want to be in the world. How do you get back on track? Like, I want to know for you personally, what are those things that help you get back on track? And then what are the things that you help your clients, like the tools you give them to come back when they've gotten off track?
Yeah. So, the most powerful thing in that, and for me, is mantras, really, because I love that you can speak something and make it real, or write it down and make it real, especially if it comes to you. Like, I'm not going to go say it's a download from the universe or anything like that, but it's like, if something comes to you like that resonates, right? Like for me, like, remember who you are. That's something I just wrote about, but that's something that I would feel myself getting ungrounded, right? And as I told you guys earlier, I spend a lot of time not being grounded, but every now and then that's not a good thing. So I was like, okay, remember who you are. When you feel a challenge, like, remember who you are. I can say, remember who you are in your divinity. I can say, we can spin that in whatever direction, but it snaps me, I can do it, right? And I help my clients with that. Like when I was telling you about intern Abby, who's an amazing human being, like we're working on her to just create an intention to have a mantra come up for her. That way, whenever this pattern starts to go, she can use that mantra as like, oh right? And that'll snap back into it. And then the second thing really is understanding that whatever I'm going through in that situation, whatever's taking me off track, like, I'm going to have gratitude for it at some point. Right. I mean, in the best example I can find for that is like that high school girlfriend or boyfriend that like broke your heart. I'm looking at it now, 15 years later, you're like, man, I learned so much from that. That was so great. But the gratitude gap was really big. And when you see these, kind of enlightened masters like Don Miguel Ruiz, right? And something happens that would annoy him and he doesn't really react to it. It's not because he doesn't feel that. It's just the gratitude gap has gotten so small that it's kind of unnoticeable. He just doesn't. It's like, oh wow, that was a learning for me. I can grow from that.
He's like water.
Right? Wearing the flowy robes probably doesn't hurt that either. So the number one practice is to get some flowy robes.
Is step one of this whole thing. I like that. I like the term gratitude gap because that really kind of sums it up, because there's a tendency in like, hindsight's 20/20, for example, right? So that's like another way of saying a similar thing, but it doesn't necessarily give you, it's like it was accidental. You know what I mean? Now you're at this point and, oh, well, hey, hindsight's 20/20 because now I can see this. But when you talk about it as a gratitude gap, there's like an understanding that at some point you're going to get there. There's going to be gratitude for this shitty thing that's happening right now. We just got to cross the gap. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, it's very different than, hopefully someday I'll be able to see that this period of suffering was worthwhile.
And when there's a gap, and then that's you're going to be grateful at some point. Well, then that's the biggest part of the message that I like to share with the world is like taking ownership of your experience. That's okay. Well, I know I'm going to be grateful for it at some point. Well, what can I do to make myself grateful for it right now? Like what practices can I implement? That's going to be different based on the circumstances, right? If it's a breakup, that's one thing. If you lost your job, that's a whole different conversation, right? Some of the things may be the same, but like I'm going to be grateful for this at some point because there's some kind of friction that I needed into my life. And a lot of times just taking responsibility for the fact that you either you created it or allowed it to happen, which is kind of the same thing. Right. And that's so challenging for a lot of people because we end up at the mercy of the world versus creating.
Yeah, so many things. Oh, this kind of shit always happens to me. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Maybe you always happen to that kind of shit.
Exactly. That's weird. That shit was just hanging out, and you showed up, and you got right in the middle of it.
You chose to walk into the shitstorm, bro. Don't get mad when you come back dirty. It's like, it is what it is.
I keep thinking about Rafiki in The Lion King when he says to Simba, remember who you are.
Somebody brought that up earlier today. I keep forgetting that's where that came from, but subconsciously, like,
I think in fact, I feel like if you took your hair down, like you would embody Rafiki a little bit. So like you could go full Rafiki.
Rafiki's just a bomb.
Totally.
The best shaman of all time.
The best.
That's probably why I got into plant medicine, was just because Rafiki was so woke.
Right? You could tell. You were like, what's up with that monkey?
So it's funny. Like, speaking of mantras, and just to spin this into something that's always fun to talk about, and lions and Lion King.
Right.
The first ayahuasca experience I had was really, it was in like the hill country of Austin, but I was really scared, right? Like, because you guys have done ayahuasca, yes? Yeah, I know you have.
Yeah.
And so all the noises get so loud. Everything gets so loud, right? Like the laughs are loud and the cries are loud, and like it's kind of scary, right?
Intense.
And then I get this really like loving, like like it's like the divine mother was like spooning me. That's what it felt like. It just like the best way I could explain it was like if love is shooting someone with like a super soaker, I like fell into a pool. Like that's what it was, like all of it. It was like, it was so
amazing.
crazy. And she was going, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's
I got
okay.
you. I got you."
She goes, "It's not always going to be easy, but I'm always going to be here." And I was like, oh, wow. And then I looked down. And I see an eye and an ear, like, and I feel these things in my neck, and I'm like, "What is going on?" It felt pressure, but it felt really good.
Yeah.
And I was kind of moving, and I had my neck on a pillow, and I was like, "What is that?" And I just kind of see this eye and this ear. I look down, and there's like a lioness on my whole side of my left side of my body, who was like outside of me, but also part of me. And it was so wild.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I guess that's just there now. Like,
Girl.
this is me. You know? And so I'm in the middle of this, and this relentless love just kept coming up, you know, and how the lioness kind of embodies that, the jaws that can rip, you know, something's throat out, but can also carry its young around without harm.
Go ahead.
And it was crazy. So I get to the second night was a completely different experience, and the third night I just kind of blasted off into the universe and could ask a bunch of questions, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny how when you're in the DMT space, especially, you can ask questions and get answers. Like, and just for whatever reason, sometimes I talk to people that have accents, and I don't know why that is. I think I'm just dressing it up in my own imagination. It's like, this is a British guy.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's like the setting.
So refined. Yeah. And
I can trust him.
I was almost like coming out of this, you know, you start to get a little more bearings, and I was like, oh yeah, what was up with that lioness?
Yeah.
And the voice goes, "Oh, that's just your feminine essence. Like, no big deal."
Yeah.
No big deal.
Just hanging out over there.
Like that voice made light of so many things. I'm like, well, what happens when you die? And it's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You're gonna be fine.
It'll
I was
be
like,
fine.
Cool. Okay. Great.
Fair enough.
I guess I'll be chill about it.
Have you gone through a death experience during plant medicine at all?
Not real. That one felt like it. It wasn't like received like that.
Yeah.
But it felt like that's what being dead. It was wild. Like I put my head in the sleep. I was laughing the whole time because, you know, like you're just you. You're not different. Like your consciousness is different. You're just somewhere else.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
I'm somewhere else. So I was kind of feeling it. And I drank 2 cups that night, and I put like the little foot part where your feet go in the sleeping bag, like over my head, because I like spun around.
Yeah.
And then I just started laughing because all I just saw was like stars as far as I could see.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, I just jumped through a portal in my sleeping bag, so here we are.
No big deal.
And I'm laughing because then I start reaching out into it, and then I start thinking about what I look like outside of the sleeping bag. And I'm like, wow, this is big meathead in the sleeping bag, like reaching around, like into the stars. I'm just like, and I kept laughing that whole night. I'm like, I have to try to explain this in words.
Yeah.
Words are really dumb.
Yeah.
Like,
So
these
dumb.
mouth
Such a
sounds that our
terrible-
monkey faces make is like, they're really not the best form of communication
They're
at
not
all.
enough.
Worse.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be able to share this. I was like, can people come see this with me?
That's funny.
But that felt like it gave me some ease with death, and that was really cool.
I could also see, just when you said that that the mother spirit said like that she'll always be with you, she'll always take care of you. Like, it may not always be easy, but I'll always be here for you. That must, I don't know, but I could see that speaking to that young boy whose mom was like not always there for him, right? Like it's amazing how the plant medicine just knows those little nuanced things to say that like get right to the heart of the matter, you know? And I don't know, when you said that, I was like, oh, I bet that was really powerful for you to hear.
Well, it's fundamentally you, right? I mean, this is the thing. It's like these experiences of connectedness, and the reason that it seems that way is because it's all the same thing, you know what I mean? It's all it's internally generated, you know, and so it's however this stuff comes up is like it's the most real and like insightful thing for you because it is you know? It's just like,
yes.
And there it is, like, oh my God, how did you know? You're like, wait a minute, who are you? Like, this is
like, I'm you, bro. It's
don't worry about it. This is all good.
People are like, is that scary? I mean, they think they get scared of that, and I'm like, yeah, because seeing yourself is scary.
Yeah.
Like when you start to take ownership of your own life and you have to take responsibility for yourself and you have to investigate yourself and create some self-awareness. Like one of the scariest things you'll ever see in your life is you, because you're kind of full of shit.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
You know, you've done some really hurtful things to people, and you've sold yourself short.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to keep doing it, but if you can start to adjust those patterns, and that's really the magic of psychedelics for me, and the way that I share it with other people is it just gives you a chance to step outside of yourself and like see your life for what it is up to that point, and be like, oh wow, I'm doing this thing I don't really want to do anymore, and then not do it, you know. Or, you know, the second night with ayahuasca was really incredible, where I fought this like dark entity that was me. It said, it's like, I have you, and I have your dad, and I have your brother, and I have all the men that you've never known. And I was like, okay, well, let's fucking rumble then, because I'm going to obviously fight this like demon.
Yeah.
I got it.
What else are you going to do?
You know? I don't know.
I'm not busy.
I play flag football in my frat, so I'm pretty fucking hard. You know? So I thought we start throwing down, and I remember I'm so exhausted by the end of it, and I'm like shaking and sweating, and I'm sitting in this chair, and I was sitting up for this one, and my head's against the wall, and I can just feel like the veins in my neck, just like I'm fighting as hard as I can.
Yeah.
And I would come out and take a breath and then go back in. It was terrifying. It was 3 hours of that.
Yeah.
And then like in my vision, I just remember like fetal positioning out, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just done. And then my dad and my brother show up in my vision. And my dad was my age. It was like, you know, so I was 27. So my brother was 26 and my dad was kind of our age.
Yeah.
And then we just were crying and just hugged.
Aw.
And then poof, over.
Well,
That's
The trip's
it.
over. I'm done.
Yeah.
I was like
Plane
back
is
to just
landed.
normal. And I was like, oh, you can't fight this. You just got to love it.
Yeah.
You got to love it for what it is.
Right.
And then, you know, I said my parents are addicts. Like my dad's still in prison. And I saw him that next weekend. So like 3.5 days later, 4 days later.
Wow.
And I looked at him through glass, right? And I swear to God, it was like looking through a fucking mirror. Like,
What a
it
trip.
was like, I was like, oh, we're the same. And he wasn't really around much for me growing up, but it was
Right.
like the level of compassion and empathy I tapped into through that experience was absolutely mind-blowing. So,
Right.
you know, I try to tell these stories as fun and light because they are in a way,
Right.
but it's really what you get out of it is what I like
Yeah.
to lead with. It's like, I didn't know what empathy was. Like, I knew what the word kind of meant, and I knew I probably wasn't very good at it.
Right.
But you tap into that, it's like, it's a whole
Yeah.
different, you see the world through a whole different lens, you know?
Right.
And how powerful you emerge. Like, I think especially for men, for boys, they need that masculine energy. They need that role model. And obviously you had your grandpa, but there's something different about having your father. And I feel like there's so many young boys and men who don't have that strong male role. So they become even harder. They try to like become even tougher in order to, I don't know, to like exemplify that it doesn't matter that they didn't have that strong
Yeah.
role or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
I'm going to show you I'm still tough, or you can't hurt me. And I think that like you being able to transform that situation into compassion, like imagine the access now that you have that your dad didn't have or that you wouldn't have had without that experience.
Yeah.
Like, it's so powerful.
Yeah, it changed everything. I mean, that's when I was closing my gym too. Like actually the only reason I got to go do ayahuasca, so somebody's sister had their kid premature, like by a week, and or just early. Like, so the kid was fine, but he's like, I just can't go. Do you want to go? Like 2 days before, I was like,
Wow.
it just all happened.
Yes.
That way.
It's meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the
Yeah,
waiting
that's
list. Like, yeah, you want to go? I was
Yeah.
like, I'm in.
Yeah.
And it's just funny how like, it walked into my life at the
Right.
right time, and it just kind
Yeah.
of shifted the way I saw
Yeah.
everything, you know. And from there, like that's the plant medicines have been a really big part of my life and a part of the message. I don't just hand them out to people. Like I said, I don't like,
Yeah.
hey, you're 23, you should probably go do a bunch of mushrooms on
Right.
the beach, and you're gonna sort everything out.
Yeah,
Like,
that's-
that's not the conversation, you know. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Everything
thing-
will be fine.
you know, things like there's what MAPS is doing with MDMA and psilocybin. It's beautiful.
It's
you know,
beautiful,
how
yeah.
people cope with trauma. Like everybody's got some, or not everybody, but a lot of people have some kind of trauma that needs to
Yeah.
be revisited and released.
Yeah.
And you know, the gratitude gap may never be closed.
Right.
You know, and you may be struggling with something that your mother or father gave to you that you have nothing to do with.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to go back and resolve that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
when I did Wachuma in Peru, we were down at Spirit Quest with Don Howard, and he's a magic human being. And I don't mean like he's a
Yeah.
beautiful man. He's been working with the plants for a long time, but his Wachuma is a San Pedro cactus, and it's from the Andes when they used to where that kind of came from, and they brew it in a different way there, so it's like 9 hours. And I remember we've been in the jungle all day, and you kind of walk around. It's kind of like mushrooms or MDMA or something like that, where you can really be around on it.
You're
It's
active,
like
yeah.
opens your heart to the world.
Yeah.
And we had gone to this little spring and played in the mud, and actually told my girlfriend at the time that I loved her for the first time, which was like a really amazing experience. And I was under the canopy of the trees talking to each other, like I could see the energy connected to the trees.
Nice.
It was just this. It was one of those, I wouldn't trade that. I would
Yeah.
give everything I have for that moment. It was
Yeah.
one of those beautiful moments of my life. And then I'm on the boat on the way back. I remember thinking like it was so amazing and so beautiful, and I remember saying that everything that ever happened in my life and before me had to happen for this moment to exist, and that in itself is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's just, again, you just open up the boundaries of how much gratitude you can feel for just sitting at a table hanging out talking on microphones.
Yeah,
right,
totally.
Right, for everything, for all the good, all the bad.
All the bullshit that's come before.
Yeah. I think that this, there's so many things because like, especially your age, we were talking about this before we went live, you're 31, right? Mm-hmm. So you're kind of straddling, like you are a millennial, but you're sort of on like the front end edge of it. And like, it's interesting to see the millennials, like, I feel like it's so hard for them. Like all the things that all the generations have gone through before, I don't think it's anything compared to what the millennials are facing, because there's sort of like the whole world is their oyster. Like they could do anything. There's all this access to information, but there seems to be like this seemingly like they're overwhelmed by it, and they're so tunnel visioned into their electronics. And even though there's this great big world, they seem to go even deeper into this small electronic gap. And I'm just curious, like, for you being on sort of the one end of it, and so you obviously are part of it, but like looking back, what do you see for the kids coming behind you that is going to be the biggest struggle for them to overcome?
Yeah, that's overwhelming is the best word. Mm-hmm. And I've been more and more people have reached out. I was on shout out to the Post Grad Problems podcast, Touching Base is what it's called. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of millennial, Total Frat Move is the same brand, and I'm friends with those guys, and came on their podcast to talk about this kind of stuff because they don't talk about this much on their show, but it has a big, it resonates with their audience. Mm-hmm. And so more and more people have reached out to me that are 22, 23, like an overwhelming number on it, honestly. And the number one thing they say is that they just don't know what the hell to do next because there's so many options.
Yeah.
Right.
There's so many options. I mean, and this isn't just lifestyle. This is dating. This is it's everything. It's like, can you imagine having that many decisions? Because we've gone from where you just do what your parents did, like that was 2 generations ago.
Yeah, not that long.
Totally.
And their kids are like, well, I can move to Cambodia and volunteer at this place, and that would be really fulfilling because that's I'm supposed to follow my dreams because that's what Gary Vaynerchuk says. Or my parents want me to be responsible and have this. I really would like to have healthcare because if I break my leg, I'm going to be in debt for 7 years.
Right.
It's like there's so many. You're almost like paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, for sure.
And no one teaches you what do you actually value about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like how can you explore yourself and understand what do you value about yourself, and how can you create a life where you bring that forward. And that that doesn't mean that you have to have a job where you're a podcast host or a life coach or or you're in fitness or whatever that may be, right? These jobs that from the outside look very fulfilling because those are very stressful too.
Sure,
you can be an accountant and still be living the fuck out of life. That's what we look at. Like, how can you do that? That means I've had a guy come to me just recently and he got a civil engineering degree, right? And he was about to graduate. He was about a month from graduating, and it was one of those things where he's like, I know that this isn't really what I want to do. And I said, okay, here's what you do. 'Cause, some people tell you like, well, then fuck it and go follow your dreams and do all these things. I'm like, get the job that pays the bills, everything covers your basis.
Right.
Live minimally as much as you can while being happy with that. Mm-hmm. That requires as little energy from you as possible. Mm-hmm. Like get the job that covers everything you need to cover with that just requires as little as you as possible, and invest all the rest of that into figuring out what you really want to do because it's going to take you years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It should take you because you're going to do some things wrong and you're going to launch on projects and no one's going to care.
Yep.
And there's things like that's a nice rational pathway.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you're not like finger painting and trying to sell it on Etsy and make a
think
living out of that because that doesn't make any sense, right? But that's this we're sold via Instagram an idea of what life could be and should be, when really it's just the tip of the iceberg as to what's really going on. And even if you got that, you're still going to be just as disillusioned as whenever you reach your 20th anniversary at the firm. It's like it's all the same thing. And if you don't understand what you value about yourself, then what you do is meaningless anyways.
Yeah, I think this is such important information because I think everyone thinks that their happiness lies on the other side of discovering their true passion in life. And as much as that is super important, you're going to come up against the exact same things that you do in your job that you dislike when you go after your true passion. So like you have to realize that the true mastery comes in being able to create a life that's well lived in any context, and then just keep on, pushing the envelope further, more towards a more expansive, reality of your existence. But like people miss that piece. They think once I get over there, then I'll be happy. Then
Yeah.
I'll be fulfilled. If you're not happy and fulfilled right here, right now, you're not going to be over there. It's a guarantee. You're going to find the same problems and the same kickback over there that you do find here, you know? And I think people miss that. And Instagram and all of those things definitely play into it. But ask any Instagram model or any Instagram person, like, they get so sick of themselves. They're like, I'm so sick of posting and, you know, like holding this perfect life up. It's like everyone goes through their resentment towards whatever they're doing in life. You have to find beauty and love no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah, I look at our Instagram sometime. I'm like, damn, who's living that life? You know what I mean?
That life looks
That's me, like, for sure. I recognize myself in those pictures, but dude, our life doesn't look like that. You know what I mean? But then on the flip side, it does. We did all of these things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like every place we've been and all of that shit's real. But what you make out of it, and you know what I mean, what you make it mean about who you are is like the part that gets a little bit, you know, wonky, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what
Super
we were
interesting.
saying earlier, like to acknowledge the fact that you've been kind of chasing a carrot is to let go of it a part of your identity.
Yeah.
Right. It goes from like, well, then you're going to go from first grade to second grade. It's like always
Right.
excited for the next thing, and then you go, oh, you got to pick college out. And that's like the biggest decision we'll ever make, which is
Right.
you're gonna go spend a bunch of money for a mediocre accomplishment. Is that what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Right. And then you get, well, then I got to have this job, and then I got to do this thing, and that's what I'm getting more is like I just don't like I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get a job and like cover my bases and do these different things, and then people freak out. But it's again, if you can. It's funny. It's almost counterintuitive. Is you can take a second and create some space and reflect on yourself, understand what you value about yourself, understand your intentions in the world through some practices. And those practices are everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't have a magic secret to that.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
There's a book called The Secret.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can read that. Yeah.
In my opinion, it's trash, but
It hits on some things.
It was
It
a
hits on
secret
some
for a
things.
reason.
yeah, exactly. No, but if you have, then you can bring a full version of yourself to your job interviews and to your relationships and to your connections and to your network meetings. And they're like, damn, that 23-year-old is woke. And then they like you, right? And, and one actually practice I had somebody do recently was like, how do you want to be introduced to people? Right? Like, think about that. So if I was to introduce you guys to someone that you guys didn't know that I knew,
Right.
I introduce you like, hey, these guys run these crazy retreats. They really help people like have transformational experiences. I'm sure that would make you guys feel, that's what how I recognize y'all, and that's how I would introduce you, right?
Yeah.
If if you're in an office environment, it's like, do you want to be introduced as like Mike from accounting?
Yeah.
Or do you want to introduce like, hey, this is Mike. He just got back from this crazy retreat
Right.
run by this couple that from California.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So-
Yeah.
but it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you the one that's always doing the crazy things, or that you like have, because people are going to know when you start to express yourself what you really value about yourself. And it's a fun little practice to create some objectivity, because you step outside yourself and it's like, oh, how do people introduce me to their friends that I don't know?
Sure,
It's
totally.
a weird thing, but
Yeah.
it's like, it's something I just kind of came around.
Yeah.
the
That's
other
cool.
day.
I like
That is
that.
interesting, because I don't I'm trying to, as soon as you said that, I'm like, how do people introduce me?
Fire chief.
Yeah, I mean, that gets thrown around sometimes, but that's
November
interesting.
on the 2017
Oh, I
calendar.
can remember this.
Yeah. You know.
You may recognize him from November. Yeah,
got a great
no, but
voice.
that's such a good way for. I think this is what you were saying, but to create the space, to create that little bit of self-awareness around what it is that, I mean, and not that, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but not that you should be super concerned necessarily about what everybody around you thinks about you, but there's definitely something to how you present yourself in the world, right? Because fundamentally, listening to how people describe you, the language that they use to talk about you, is one of the best reflections that you can get. Because that's, I mean, like we were already saying earlier, language is a terrible form of communication, but it's the one that we've got. You know, it's better than text, like barely,
Exactly,
but better.
I wish
And that's
someone would draw a picture.
Here
I'll tell you about her. Let me sketch it out really
draw
quick.
you a quick. This is gonna be you. Who is this?
Revert all the way back to the cave days. This is super paleo.
She's the one with the club. Yeah. In this depiction. But yeah, it really is that is fundamentally how you're created in the world, though, is through other people's language, and it's their interpretation of the things that you're doing and putting forward. And like you said in the very beginning, their interpretation of the person that you're putting forward is up to you to create, right? So if you're this guy in this town with all the same people who have put you in this box and you've been there forever, and then you step into this entirely different world, you get to fundamentally recreate yourself, which is fantastic, but then also scary as hell, because now it's your responsibility to be the person that that you want. So when you step into that position and somebody comes back at you and describes you in a way that you don't find flattering, well, that's on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Unless the guy's just a complete asshole that hasn't been paying attention, which I mean, there's that too.
But their view is still valid. That's the thing. It's like, oh, that guy's, he's just a dick. So I should listen to him. It's like, well, his perspective is actually just as valuable as your girlfriend's perspective.
Yeah, it's like
that's
fair
funny,
point. Yeah, because maybe you didn't you didn't fire up anything in him that caused him to pay enough attention to you to have a solid opinion. You're just so vanilla that he's introducing you to somebody.
You're just a blank screen for him to just project himself onto.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's on you. Well, that's we talked about journaling a little bit earlier, and that's been a big part of what that's been actually my favorite practice that I've applied to my life in the past few years.
And you do the morning pages, right?
Morning pages, yeah. Sometimes they turn into afternoon pages, but I get them done. But I love asking myself questions. And one thing that Paul Selig, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he wrote the Book of Mastery, and it's a little bit. It's probably one of the most woo-woo things I get into.
Yeah.
He's a channeler, so
right.
Cool.
I've met him in
that.
person, and it was like really intense. But
he was just on the Amp on Aubrey Marcus.
He was on Aubrey Marcus's podcast.
Yeah.
And what you guys didn't know is that we got to ask him questions afterwards.
Oh, nice.
And that was incredible.
Oh, nice.
Spoiler alert, I cried a lot.
Yeah.
But no, so one thing he says, and I'm actually reading the Book of Truth now, or listening to it, and it's fantastic. It's such a fantastic book, but it's like, how are you being seen? And I love asking myself those questions in the morning pages. Like I just love, because it's funny when you write things down, like you really have a pretty good gauge on yourself. You can slow yourself down a little bit and make it into words. And it's like, okay, well, how am I being seen? Like I was talking to you a little bit about this before the show, the last podcast we did on my show. It's like, I want to know how I would like to present myself to new people that I'm meeting that I'm going to be doing work with. Yeah. Right. Like what that means to me. And then I do a little bit of writing about that, and you can get a good gauge on it. And you go, okay, cool. Now I've got a mantra. I want to, be organized and compassionate, open-minded. Right. I mean, that wasn't exactly mine, but something like that. Like you can come away with that going into a job interview as a kid, going into a relationship or a conversation with your partner. Like that how am I being seen question is really, really powerful.
Yeah. And moment to moment. Right. So you can, just like you said, you go into a job interview or you've got some sort of a review with your boss or whatever, right? So you can completely reframe yourself. Who am I? Right now I need to be this guy. You know what I mean? This combination of traits or whatever. Yeah. And that's probably not the person you want to be when you get home. That's interesting, because it's like, man, it requires a level of having your shit together. You know what I mean?
I would say I have my shit together, but I'm pretty good at that
together. Like shit together level 5 for sure, to be able to, but to have the wherewithal to frame yourself in those situations to keep it together. But what a powerful practice. All in all,
And the morning pages practice is just incredible.
Yeah. I did that really religiously for a few years, and then I don't know, like one day I was just like, okay, I'm done with this.
Yeah, maybe that's what I go.
I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. You're morning Instagram now.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing I want to tackle here with you is that you have access, and I mean, as a young man, you have access to some interesting language, some a unique perspective on life. Like you really have dove into a corner of the world that I don't see from that many men at your age, and but I do see it emerging more and more. So I guess what I want to ask you, what part, if you were going to put this in a smoothie, and this is like a Connor smoothie, what are the ingredients of that smoothie? Is it half psychedelics, half personal development? What's the smoothie that is making you have this access and this language? Because this is not the kind of language that I'm hearing from a lot of people your age.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, the Pleasure Monkey is a drink at the Onnit Cafe. So if you're at the Onnit Cafe, head on over to get the Pleasure Monkey. Shout out Onnit Cafe and everybody working there. No, and it is keto friendly as well.
Awesome.
No, so that's a really good question. And I think it would be about half curiosity, right? And that I feel like that embodies the psychedelics, and that embodies the learning. It's just a constant seek for curiosity. I'm writing a TEDx talk that hopefully I'll be on that stage one of these days, but it was my parents' addictions left me addicted to asking why. I was like, why is this? Why is that happening? That doesn't make it, just because it was so weird to me.
Yeah,
right. It was
yeah.
like, it just didn't make sense. I'm like, but that's not what parents are supposed to do.
Right.
You know, and which is, you know, looking back now, an immense amount of gratitude for that. And actually I've gotten to the point where my, you know, parents are that way too.
Wow.
It's really powerful, but it has to be that, like half curiosity, probably 20% psychedelics. Oh man.
Math.
This is hard.
You're like, is that 100% yes?
70, 70.
No, and then I think 20% is just really like structured work.
Yeah. Getting
like
after
doing
it.
the work. Like it's like cool. It's you can end up a hippie real quick if you want to
Yeah.
dive into this stuff.
Totally.
You know? I'm like, I did 17 hits of LSD yesterday, and I'm just, like, dialed in. You know, right?
I figured out my next 47 spirit animals.
No, I'm actually all the animals. That's
I'm
what
all
I
of
have to do. And then 10% just fucking play.
Yeah.
Like that really binds it all together.
Yeah.
You know? But I think so much of it is embodied by the power of curiosity. And when I say curiosity, I mean like that's curious introspection of yourself and really the nature, like being curious as to what you can actually do with yourself.
Yeah.
Like that's so much of it. And saying yes to things that make you a little bit uncomfortable and saying no to things that you know you shouldn't fucking say yes to.
Yeah.
Like that's all a product of being curious about what you can actually bring to the world.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? So, and I actually have heard that a lot about like guys my age don't really generally speak this way, and it's I don't know. I mean, I would
Maybe
say
they do,
I don't
maybe
know
they
that
don't.
I don't know that many that do. I
Yeah.
guess. You know, it works
Well,
well for
I
me,
don't,
but
and I don't even think, you know, it's not anyone's, it's not good, bad, it's not anyone's fault. It's just that I think that the way that life goes, especially for men, is that you're forced a little into having to make shit happen as your first priority, like the job, the money, the car, because the girl, right? Like this is kind of for men. They have to sort of go that route. They do have a little bit more space, I think, than women do. Like women have to get shit done right away because if they want to have kids and blah, blah, blah. But I think that it's really cool to see more and more guys starting to speak this language. And obviously Aubrey is a huge influence in that space. And, you know, I told you the other day, I've been listening to his podcast since it was The Warrior Poet. And it was the first time I was hearing guys talk like this that weren't just hippified out, like rubbing patchouli oil all over them.
He does rub a lot of patchouli on himself, though.
Yeah, well, that's legit. I'm all about it. I do love the patchouli.
It is part of the deal.
Yeah.
But I just think that like it's so nice to see this kind of, you know, these Texas boys. Like this conversation is happening outside of Topanga Canyon, which is
true.
You know, it's really cool.
Well, listening to Aubrey's show, like it really showed. Like that's the first time I think I was like, I don't feel as weird. I don't feel like I'm that weird. Like there's somebody else like, that I can resonate with here. And it's funny that we're like, you know, I'm a block away in an Airbnb staying with them now. That's it just seems normal because it's like I've gotten almost like just conditioned to that being normal now.
To be in the kind of the deal.
Yeah, but back then it was just podcasts and you know, eating Alpha Brain.
Right. Yeah. Which is that's a great place to start. Yeah. But the thing that's like to me that makes it special, like this combination, right? So it's like if you were to compare Topanga Canyon to Austin, you know, it's like or just in this reference, right? It's easy to get stuck in Topanga Canyon in a way that's not any sort of actionable in the world. Mm-hmm. And you 100% limit your reach. And I mean, let's just say that you want to spread your message or your word or whatever you think is important in the world. You limit it dramatically by being stuck there and not being able to communicate in a way that is palatable to the average person, you know? And I think that's what, getting to know you, I mean, you're clearly doing that. And I think that's something that Aubrey and Joe Rogan, obviously these guys, they communicate shit that is beyond the average conversation in a way that's super, super palatable and people can get behind and are like, actually, no, I mean, I want to be able to have these conversations with people. Like this stuff seems important, you know? And it's profound, you know? And I think, and actually like on just a whole nother level of this stuff is like the Jordan Peterson world, right? Where he is speaking about this stuff in a way that like I couldn't, but like I get it. I'm like, holy shit, no! I'm like, what he's saying is right. Like I don't know, I don't know anything else about it, but like, listen to this because I think this is what I think. I can't articulate it, but man, is he nailing it in the way that it comes out, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's the power of relatability, right? If you're not relatable, I mean, that's
right.
cool. If you, I mean, I had the same, kind of thoughts about Encinitas, California, right?
Yeah.
I had some friends down there, and it's like, you guys are kind of living in an echo chamber, and,
for
and you
sure.
kind of derailed a little bit to where I'm pretty out there, and like I'm having a hard time. Like, over here, like got past life regressions, and channeling aliens, like within the same house party. Like I'm having a hard time believing that two people with superpowers just happen to be at the same party. There's 30 people here, like the next thing I'm gonna be like, I can fly. Yeah, I got
Is there
that.
an energy vortex
I manifested
here?
the shit out of some flight the other day. I mean, it's no big deal. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, the relatability is huge. That's like I said, my buddies over at Post Grad Problems, their statement was, yeah, Connor's kind of out there, but in a relatable way.
Right.
I was like, I'd take that. And
you're on the lead edge. Like, it's good. It's like someone's got to just kind of like push it a little bit further, but still be within the context of the conversation.
And I think that's the big thing that you said there. I think if you dive into that, is you've created a space for people to be a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, like they can
Right.
be themselves.
Yeah.
When you create that space by showing people it's okay, well, then there's a little bit of freedom there, a little liberation in that. You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of ownership and liberation are really tied together. So it's like, wow, I can feel a little bit free now. I went to an ecstatic dance and it wasn't as weird as I thought it was going to be.
Right.
Man, I can like do these things. I don't have to be ashamed of myself and let myself out of the cage a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
So I feel like we could probably have like part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to like infinity with you, because this is just the stuff that like is so fun to rap about. But before we go, I want to talk a little bit about the open relationship story, because you talk a lot about that on your podcast. We see that theme coming up in a lot of different podcasts and a lot of different circles. Why do you think there's so much interest or curiosity towards open relationships right now?
It's funny that you say that. I mean, I had Whitney Miller on the podcast just the other day, and that was a really great show. And it was funny because I think that open relationships get painted in a really, they get painted really white, like really beautiful, like, oh wow, everybody loves everybody, and and everybody's just completely abandoned insecurities, and everything's good to go. It's cool. These people are super woke. And I think that was a really rational conversation we had, but it's becoming more normalized, because I think when we start to let go of shame and start to see how much like shame and judgment and fear have shaped our behavior, well, that perpetuates, right? So I don't have to be ashamed of not having that 9-to-5 job. Right. As long as I'm taking care of myself and I'm bringing a great version of myself to the world, then fucking A, I'm going to do it. Right. And I think when you do the same thing, that can come into your relationship as well in a really powerful way, where it's like, I don't have to be ashamed of being a human being. Right. So attraction doesn't need to be something I have to hide or keep away. Now, if you want to take that down, down the rabbit hole and sleep with other people, that's one thing. And there's a lot of work that has to be done. You're essentially just signing your warrant to have conversations every day for the foreseeable future. And there's something very rational to be said about that. But it's also like, I love being able to hold a space where I can have a conversation with a partner, and grow through that, through the reality, not through fairy tale,
right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are getting to that same place where curiosity has led us here, but again, it's almost nice because it puts you in this uncomfortable space where you have to then understand what you value about yourself. And that's been my experience. So, with this so far, and being in a relationship that we tried it, and it was like a complete shit show. Like, I'm not going to say that it was anything but a shit show. You can actually go back and listen to the podcast on the Pleasure Monkey podcast with my ex-girlfriend, and it's a perfect example of how you can make something we had the best of intentions, but it got messy. Right? She's fantastic. Shout out to Liv. She's awesome. It's a great human being. We learned so much through that, right? But because we threw ourselves into it in that way, it's like, well, you're going to fast track learning because you don't have a choice, right?
Right.
Like, you're starting off in the fire, you're going to figure it out, or you're going to get burnt, right? That's how it goes. But I think there's something that really, really powerful about that amount of freedom. Yeah. And being able to just truly, authentically express yourself to someone that you love, and have that be received with love, right? Without like this, I don't know, it just does something to the dynamic that I think is very liberating for people.
Right.
Do you think that will be a long-term lifestyle choice for you, or do you see that there's a point in your life where you say, I don't know, maybe just having one partner?
That's a really good question, and I thought about this a lot. For me now, like, I've been single for 3 months, right? So I've just kind of gotten back around to, I think there's a really great opportunity when you come out of a relationship, especially one that you cared so deeply for someone, to really say, okay, what were close the gratitude gap.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, what do I really value in a partner, right? Like, what do I value about myself? What do I need? If I can find someone who values things about me that I value about myself, and bring some other things to that as well, and that I can value in them, like, that's a good partnership, right? And then start to understand that. So coming out of that, I've been really asking myself the same question, and I almost see it as like an inverse. Like, I don't necessarily. When it comes to open relationship thing, I don't even like. I wish I could have stole the term open relationship before it came into just fucking other people. Because it really does like to have an open dialogue relationship, right? It's like, I want to be open where I just want to. If I could create my perfect relationship, I just want to understand, like, I'm going to evolve, she's going to evolve,
right?
And our conscious relationship that we created by putting our experiences together into one thing will evolve as well. Yeah, and if that means sleeping with other people. At one point, like, I'm not opposed to that. You know, I had just to make this kind of light. Like, my last girlfriend, she was like, "Would you have a threesome with 2 dudes?" I was like, "I've done so many things by this point in my life that I thought I would never do. I'm not going to say no." Right. You know, I was like, "Yeah, I guess right? So, yeah." You know, like, I haven't been to Burning Man yet, but that seems like something that goes on there. And I'm not gonna be, you know what I mean? If it feels right, it feels right. But then again, I'm just it's driven by curiosity and, like, it's really, like, compassionate, loving curiosity. I think it's really great, but it's just that rational understanding. So I think that it's. The intentions behind it for me are that, and I think if I can maintain and anchor myself in those intentions, the idea is, like, I don't need to be irrational about this thing. I don't need to be possessive, but I also need to own my shit. I need somebody. I know that showing up is more important than the physicality of it all, anyways, and also understanding someone else's motivations and their actions too, and being able to be objective about that. Like, there's so many. I mean, we could talk about this forever. But when it comes down to it, is like understanding the evolution of each other and having compassion for that, and embracing it and learning and growing together, and that's going to keep. You know, novelty doesn't only exist in someone else outside of the relationship, right? Novelty exists in helping you and your partner uncover parts about each other that you didn't know existed based on the reflection that you can bring. Oh, and that's really beautiful because we are attracted to novelty. Right. And actually, you guys have been together for, what, 12 years? Ever.
15 years.
15
married.
So how many different relationships have you all had? Like 3 by now?
Well, and it
no,
really...
No, I'm saying, like, within
No, I know.
other, right?
And it really helps that I change my hair color a lot.
I love that. That's one of the things that's like one of those things. Like, I like the hair color change a lot.
You have to.
It's like different outfits and stuff. No, like, it's like you have different phases of relationships. And and I didn't say different relationships, but like different phases that you go through.
No, it's like we've had 3 marriages within our marriage. Absolutely.
Like, Mr. Perel talks about that a lot. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
So something that you brought up there, which I think is just incredibly important, is like, just viewing the open relationship thing, and because I think you're on point with this. I think a lot of people, as soon as you say an open relationship, people think, oh, swingers, you know, they just want to sleep with other people or whatever the situation is. But imagine the level of communication and authenticity that you have to have with your partner in order to do that without hurting each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, it's almost like you just can't pick a more like fraught with peril path to walk to make you better at communicating, you know? Yeah. And just like the relationship that would spring from that level of communicativeness and like ability to be with that person and fully understand and like truly communicate, not just talk to each other. Like, that's gold, you know? And like, I think if you were to find, you'd probably find a lot more people who wouldn't necessarily just have an immediate distasteful reaction to the idea if it was golf. Well, if you guys golf together, imagine, like, you know what I mean? Like, if golf brought up so much bullshit between you that you had to be purely authentic and real with each other in every moment, people would be like, oh yeah, you know, you guys have a little difficulty in your relationship, you should pick up golf. You know what I mean? Like, that would be the thing, and it'd be easy to talk about, you know, but because it's such a taboo thing, which is what makes it so fundamentally important that you communicate. It would just push you into that spot. It's interesting.
You have to see a lot about yourself in that whole scenario. I'm you know, I've never been in a truly open relationship, right? So there's a lot of learning there for me, but going in with the intentions, and now that I have this little platform to share it on, it's kind of it's kind of fun. You guys just go along for the ride.
Yeah, totally. You're like, let me try it out, guys. I'll tell you how it goes.
I'm like, I kind of walk the line as like what's oversharing and what's being vulnerable. So go to the Pleasure Monkey podcast to find out.
Exactly. That's what I love, though, because I think we need more more of that authenticity. I think so many of us are afraid to be embarrassed. We're afraid to be exposed. We're afraid of all those things. And if you just really go right back up to the line, it's like we all have shame. We all have pain. We all have joy. We all have pleasure. We all have the human experience. So like, why do we have to be so afraid about it? Why do we have to be so protective about it? Because we're not really helping each other by being guarded. We're not really expanding the human experience or making it more rich or more powerful by hiding ourselves from each other. So like, I think it's amazing. We need that. We need more of that oversharing, if you will, because it gives people the courage to say like, okay, well, if he can do it, then I can do it too. You know, like there's, wow, he's this, you know, this big strapping guy from Texas that like just told me about what he's afraid of or how he feels inside or whatever. It's like, this is the same with Adam. You know, I always think it's amazing. Like when Adam, there's so like, he's so relatable because it's like, he's this fireman and he's all of these quintessential man things. But then when he's like able to be raw and vulnerable, it's so powerful for the human race and especially for men, you know, it's really powerful.
Yeah,
so,
and men can be called to that too. It's there's a part of that you get tapped into where it's embracing like who you really are, right? Like you're a human being and you have feelings. You just sit in your feelings.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, you know, and that's one thing I really love about being able to go into, you know, having that intention going into these conversations and dating is like, wow, like there's a lot in that too.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
What does this mean?
Yeah,
you know,
awesome.
and then I've caught myself like, you know, and you catch yourself in your own, you know, biases and patterns. It's a fun game. But yeah, I think there's something really to be said about that. So kudos to you, man, for putting it out there.
Well, folks, if you haven't got enough of Connor here, which we know you haven't, go
Tip
over
of the iceberg.
Go over to the Pleasure Monkey podcast, check it out, because that's where you are just really authentically being you all the way and sharing all the way. And it's so cool because Leslie, who's been helping us book our podcast, literally reached out to you to book us, Adam and I, on your podcast. And you were like, I'm in Venice. Can they do it today? And Adam wasn't home. He happened to be out of town. So literally you're like, oh, if you want to come do it by yourself. And when I put you in the Google Maps, again, you were 900 feet away from me. So it was pretty meant to be. I was
absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been really, really fun.
Yeah.
Super cool, man. This is, we don't get to do enough in-person stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously we're super thankful for all of the guests that we get to have, but it's so much better in person.
It's so special in person.
I actually don't do Skype interviews.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if you can avoid it, it's like, it's such a better, I mean, sometimes it's like the only way you're going to get the information from point A to point B, but man, if you can do it in person, it's a better deal.
Yeah. Well, I'm always down to jump on y'all's. If y'all
and
I'll be out here more often and I'll see you guys in Austin soon.
Yeah. We'll do this more for sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear in like a year from now how it's all going. So we'll have to definitely do a part 2.
Yeah.
All right.
Do it.
Cool, buddy. Thank you.
Man.
Bye. Hey, folks, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please consider going to iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review and, you know, write in a nice message there. Tell us what you think. Tell us what's going on for you out there. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Specifically, how awesome we are.
But we do love connecting, and it's nice to know there's folks out there listening, enjoying, and this is a great way to just stay in communication. So if you enjoy the podcast, you listen regularly, you're getting some benefit out of this, we would so love to see that 5-star review. And give us a shout out. We'd love to hear from you.
Shed some of it.